Good morning, everyone. Welcome back. I hope you have a good rest last night and uh, enjoying the presentation discussion yesterday. Now I will use a few minutes to give a quick summary for yesterday's all the critical points. So while I was speaking, feel free to grab some coffee, drinks, and snack is not ready, but it will become soon. So okay. So a quick summary for session one. I did not specify who said that, but many information to share. So session one is about the regulatory perspective and opportunities. First bullet point I want to share is we see the growing AI adoption. Our presentation already show us the seed already received over 1,000 AI submissions since 2016. And we also see the dramatic growth from over the years. And we also see 248 IND submission and 50 NDA, ANDA, BLA submission in last year, 2024, primarily in a few areas. And then we see FDA AI guidance framework. FDA already established a risk-based 7 steps credibility assessment framework for AI use in drug development, also emphasizing the credibility requirement scales with model risk and the context of use. In the same time, also, we shared European regulatory alignment. EMA AI work plan focused 4 key pillars: guidance, policy support, tools, technologies, collaboration, change management, and experiment, with emphasis on risk-based approaches consistent with FDA's framework. We also shared generic drug AI transformation. We emphasize AI will fundamentally change how generic drug submissions are evaluated and developed. For example, FDA's internal AI tool, ELSA, which enable broad staff access to AI capability for daily regulatory work. Actually, we also emphasize the importance of a good quality of AI data. And last one, we also share the early engagement critical. Both FDA and the EMA strongly encourage early regulatory engagement to establish appropriate credibility assessment activity based on AI model risk and the intended context of use. Then move on for the session 2, which is AI streamlining workflow. First, we have a first point I want to summarize. It's FDA regulatory modernization. We have a case to show ELSA to support the regulatory assessment. Specifically, FDA has modernized the bioequivalence assessment with a structured digital process and the internal AI tools, completing AI assessment with improved efficiency and consistency. We also mentioned the AI automation tool development. FDA is developing AI-powered automation tool. One case, it's the tool for BCS determination, eliminating time-consuming manual extraction and accelerating database construction. We have mentioned workflow transformation, which is end-to-end integration. One case, I think it's from Dr. Reddy. The presentation talk about AI is streamlining the entire generic drug value chain from development to filing with specified application in peptide development, impurity prediction, and the regulatory document automation. Also, enhance the efficiency in the documentation. Automated writing and data management is one topic, very popular topic. Large language model integration with regulatory templates and the curated data warehouse are significantly reducing manual documentation time and improve data quality assessment. Last one, in the session 2, I want to share is a strategical implementation. organizational successful facts was proposed, like effective AI adoption requires understanding limitation, cross-team alignment, iterative approaches rather than rushing to be first to market. Then after 2 presentation sessions, we also have a 2 in-person breakout session. First session focus on regulatory framework and the consideration for AI tool integration in drug development. We we have a 2 introductory presentation to ignite the discussion. First one was delivered by FDA, talking about the machine learning tools and the immunogenicity risk assessment of therapeutic proteins and peptides. Another one from EpiVax, the presentation talk about integration of AI method into in silico tools for prediction of immunogenicity. And based on the presentation, we provide 4 questions. I want to read all the specific questions, but in general, first 2 questions, we talk about the importance and also consideration best practice for how to improve or guarantee the quality of the data. And questions 3 and 4, we talk about what's the best practice we can have a better credibility of the model. And we have a in-person summary table by table. It's pretty, and all the information we will gather together. Hopefully, we will publish for everybody to enjoy. Then the last in-person session is about the opportunities for AI assisted data quality assessment in supporting generic drug development and the regulatory evaluation. Dr. Nilufa Temple is the leader for this session, and she provides an introductory presentation regarding the current status of data quality assessment. Then all the participants engaged in the discussion, and just like last session, we have a breakout session to talk to provide our input and feedback on this particular question. We provided 3 questions. First question is mainly for the industry. So we want to have a better understanding what's the current practice for the data quality assessment, and then we want to understand what's the main pain point and the challenge associated with the data quality assessment. And last one, it's how the AI and the related tool can help these challenges. That concludes day 1's summary, and then I want to introduce Dr. Jayanti Das to kick off today's session. Dr. Jayanti Das is the research scientist in the Office of Pharmaceutical Quality Research and the OPQ FDA. Welcome.
Thank you, Mang. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to session 4. It is great to see all of you for today's discussion. So we have an excellent lineup of speakers today who can share their work and perspective on AI supporting drug development. So before we start our talk, I just want to quickly go over a few housekeeping notes. So each speaker, as you have seen yesterday, they will give their talk back to back. And to keep us on schedule, we will not take any questions between talks. Instead, we will have a panel discussion at the end. So I request you to please hold your questions until the panel discussion, where you will get the time to engage with all of our speakers, with some additional panelists together. And for the online attendees, you can post your questions at any time during the talk. We will collect them and we'll discuss them during the panel. So with that, let me introduce our speakers today. So our first speaker will be Dr. Volodymyr Stus. head of the clinical department from the R&D PharOs Limited. After then, we have Dr. Ian Houson, program manager from the digital CMC CERTC based at Continuous Manufacturing and Crystallization, CMAC, Strathclyde University. Our third speaker will be Dr. Katie Duncan, Director of CMC Policy and Advocacy from the GlaxoSmithKline. And finally, we will have Dr. J. Paul Kirwan, Senior Manager of Regulatory Affairs, CMC from Amgen. So after these talks, we will have a brief coffee break, and then we will have our panel discussion. So with that, let's start our first talk. So please welcome Dr. Volodymyr Stus.
Much. Good morning to organizers, audience. So what I want to tell you about today is examples of very grounded use cases for generative AI in a generic pharmaceutical company, focusing on small and mid-sized companies. An important disclosure I want to do, this presentation reflects my personal experience and opinions, and not necessarily the opinions and official position of PharOs Ltd. All trademarks, product names, and logos shown there are property of their respective owners. I include these for informational purposes only, and this does not imply any endorsement, sponsorship, or affiliation with these companies. So what I want to structure today's presentation first in core considerations, and then three groups of use cases. First group would be about agentic search or research on public data. The second group would be working on our company data, big context and alignment with the guidelines. And the third group would be making your experts a bit of programmers themselves to create tools using generative AI. So, yes, as I have told PharOs, I represent today a mid-sized European generic company, and we are not yet present in the US, but present in a number of other countries, mainly Europe, and we hope to be in the US in near future as well. And what, as a generic company, we are focused on? Well, we are focused on getting products to the market fast and making these products affordable. And for this reason, we need to be cost effective. And that's why we are not looking to train our own AI models. We are not looking to fine tune models. We are looking to take some off-the-shelf solutions and adopt them for our processes. So, core considerations. From the European perspective, we should not only consider what available models are, etc. We also need to align with the guidelines and law. So in Europe, we need to follow privacy protection, GDPR law, and also EU AI Act. What does this mean? If you want to use AI in our company, we need to assure that the data will stay in the European Union territory. And also we need to ensure the protection of privacy of the data we use. And this means we only have two options. Either build our own AI server in the basement of our IT department, which requires expertise. This is expensive and has some limitations, or some private cloud solution for the servers which will be physically located in European Union, and the provider of this solution should assure us that this data we are sending will not be used for training of models and will not be sold to third parties. Then, okay, what models to use? We talked yesterday about this. in my opinion, there's no one best model of generative AI you can use for all of your tasks. It's the best is to have a portfolio of models to choose for each of the specific tasks. Even one family of models is not enough in my experience from my one provider. You want to have different models, like FDA uses 2 different models from different providers. Also, what is important, different models have different capabilities and they evolve very fast. So we really need to follow this. Some models may allow you low hallucinations rate, yes. Some may allow you to use so-called large context. So you can put a lot of data into this model for it to analyze. Some also may have extended reasoning capabilities, others strict instruction following. And for your task, you may need any combination of these. So for brainstorming, you may even want to give the same question and data to different models and then fuse the response for your assessment. And then how? I want to underscore, humans should remain in the loop. This is very important. It was said yesterday that in our industry, we need to have someone responsible. That's why it's important to assure your people that they will stay here even though the AI is adopted, because they need to review the responses of AI and approve them. Also, I wanted to say a few things about retrieved augmented generation. It's also a hyped technology, but I have tested it myself and I don't see the simple RAG working for our use cases. You need some hybrid solutions, not just simple vector database. And also models which we use, we don't need to focus only on text models because our data in the dossier have variety of formats. So we have illustrations, we have photos, and we have a lot of numerical data, our study results. So we need our models to use tools, for example, Python or R, to process our data. We need them to recognize text in scanned images and understand also the images, coning effect on our dissolution profile. So let's go to use cases. The first group is about basically research use cases. We have public data here. So we are not limited to use some solutions in our basement. We can use the providers. Some of them are pictured here, and we are using basically the internet. And there are a variety of things and scenarios we can figure out for this. But what is important, we may need to have system prompt to tune how the model would respond to us and how it will use tools. These models should have capability of internet search. This may be a specific research agent, and we also may need them to process large context. Few examples. So this is an example of a product we've been working on. It's approved on the European market already, but at the time this question was asked to the model, it could not assess the assessment report of European agencies. So I asked how to develop value-added medications, a fixed dose combination for treatment of hypertension, what it will involve, how much it may cost, time and risk involved with the development of this project. We used a system prompt to tailor, to structure the response, and of course, internet search. And I must say that the response at this time models can give us is very good. So this is very good for the ideation. When your portfolio gives you a new idea, you can already use these models. You can implement it straight away. Another thing, so your R&D teams, clinical teams may need to look into the literature, yes? And there are specific literature searching agents or literature research agents which may do for you so-called meta-analysis on request. And it's very nice that you receive results within minutes, 2-3 minutes, and you have results. It filters out from thousands of papers to like 50 papers, or even less than 50 papers, and then give you an analysis. How many papers are in favor, so confirm your hypothesis, and how many papers against. So and you can use this. So in this particular example, I have asked, okay, is there an established PK/PD interaction between the drug, specific drug, and plasma concentrations of anti-FXA activities? Another thing, you have already product in development. You are just starting, but it's approved, and you need to prepare, for example, the bioequivalence program for that product. And you collected all the data you need yourself. So you have downloaded FDA review documents, EMA assessment report, Australian assessment report, Canadian monograph, maybe even Japanese assessment report, because LLMs, they understand all the languages, and some literature, relevant literature published by the originator. So this is a case of large context. These documents are huge, and here model managed to handle like 800,000 tokens of context and give us reliable results. Of course, after some time, you see that it cannot respond anymore, but in one task, when you ask one question with a huge context, it gives you reliable results. Also quite nice use case. And then we move to our own data. That's private, you cannot use it. I had the situation that we had the completely blocked access to any external AI tools in the organization. We can only use the approved one. And here, it's important to have some own AI server or cloud-based, trusted cloud-based solution. You may need to tune the responses of the model using system prompts, and you can use here confidential information. You have approval for that. And few examples. For example, we can do alignment checks, various alignment checks. So here we are uploading the guidelines and the protocol of our study, which we received from the CRO. And we ask, is it compliant to ICH M13A or ICH E6 guideline? And model gives us assessment. And the person responsible checks this and have her understanding. We can also check if ICF follows the protocol and if study report follows the protocol. So things like that. What else we can do? There are some routine tasks, like in your procedures, like checklists for protocol approval, ICF approval, etc. So we can do the same. We can ask our model to pre-populate a checklist for us. And then the responsible person goes point by point to verify it. And then we have an approved checklist. And actually, this is a good example to create agent. So some semi-autonomous AI system, which will give us the pre-populated checklist in Word document. And then your human in the loop needs to verify it. And my favorite one, we talked about it yesterday, like can we ask FDA to give us this ELSA system so that we can check if our dossier is acceptable or not. But we can do it ourselves, actually. So this is an example. We are not using the full dossier, but this is a real example. We have used deficiency letter responses. As we used a bunch of Gen AI models as reviewers for our deficiency letter response. And this is not for simple questions. This is for some complex questions when we needed to justify why we have deviated from the guideline, or maybe our study results are not 100% ideal. And basically, the expert prepares the document, so human starts the process, And the document is, for example, 10 to 20 pages. That's a large document, and he spent a lot of time and effort in this. And maybe in such situation, a human can forget something, simply, because he was focused on something else. And then we can ask AI, please check if we address in this response the question, do we refer to the relevant parts of the dossier also? What are the chances that our response would be accepted? And what we can do to improve quality of our response? And then we can do a few rounds of review. And when the author of the document feels that, okay, now we have covered everything possible arguments, then we pass it to the human reviewer, maybe even some external expert, before approving and sending this to the regulator. So here we have, human in the loop and human starting the process. And then, basically, I wanted to give you a few examples that your people can become actually software developers themselves. Not in the meaning that they are professional programmers now, no, but they can receive the fully functional prototypes of some applications that may make their life easier in a matter of minutes. Yeah, so this is an example. This is bioequivalence study planning. Okay, so-called one-shot prompt. So I ask a tool, create me an application for visualization of PK profiles. I plan bioequivalence study. I want to have a visualization of the profile of the product based on the PK parameters and the PK samples. And from the first attempt, it gives me a fully working prototype. And then you can take this prototype and you can give to IT persons to say, this is what I need. And they will understand much better than just from meeting with you and, rounds and rounds. And after some months of time, you receive the application from programmer, which is not what you asked, actually. This is a way to prototype it. Another example, data visualization or data analysis. So you may not know R or SAS yourself very good, but you can ask AI to help you. So this is my example. I needed forest plot to present a bunch of pilot studies results, actually for scientific advice. So our AI has helped me to generate the forest plot based on my data. A few more examples. Here, the pharmacovigilance colleagues, they needed a tool to convert abstracts in PubMed format to the Excel. And I have helped them to make a tool which has a simple user interface, 3 buttons, data in, Excel out, and that's it. This is this application they use till now. Another example in our bioequivalence clinical team, we have used 2 tools. One for power estimation and sample size, another for cost estimation. And we decided, why don't we join them together in one application and also make the user interface a bit simpler, like put in sliders for sample size, desired power, etc., number of subjects. And we created the tool which may very quickly estimate required sample size and resulting cost of the bioequivalence study. And we can give this tool to our portfolio colleagues, and they can quickly understand how much study may cost. Another example, so in our organization, we had quite a limited AI chat with one generative AI model available, and it had a lot of limitations. But in the same time, we had access to this cloud, which is trusted and which had a variety of models. So I thought, okay, maybe we can create our own chat. So this is my own implementation. This is a prototype of the system, which is very similar to ELSA. I call it chat use. And it allows to use variety of models. I think about 10 models here for selection. It allows users to create their own system prompts. We call them here assistants. We can, of course, upload documents in various formats here. We have retrieved augmented generation, so the database of documents and guidelines here to use, and also agentic internet search. So we have added here Perplexity and Gemini search, just to ease the life. So basically, the deficiency reviewer was used inside this system. So that's one of the assistants here. And basically, that's it. I hope, yeah, I follow the time. So basically, I think the path forward for generic companies is not about training their own models or finding a perfect model. It's to ensure that your employees have access to the portfolio of models. Also, they ensure the adoption of AI tools by your people, because one of the reasons of failure of these pilots in the organization is that people do not use, they fear to lose their job. So thank you very much, and looking forward to our discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Stus, for that insightful talk. Our next speaker will be Dr. Ian Houson from the Digital CMC Cersei, University of Strathclyde.
Great. So I'd like to thank the organisers for inviting me to talk. So maybe a little bit of background before I start. So probably a lot of people won't have heard of the Digital CMC Cersei. So it's one of 7 Cerseis that have been recently funded this year by the UK government. So it's really part of the UK government strategy to increase the innovation that they can get. So really, they're looking at regulation for innovation is a really strong theme across the UK government now. And so with the sort of the challenge to internal resources in the MHRA, they were looking to external groups to help do that. So as I said, we're one of 7, and we're really focusing on digital transformation. So how do we support digital tools getting used? So and also, sorry, one other subtle difference is, yes, we are funded directly by the MHRA, but we are able to work directly with companies, so collaboration, that side. Money does not change hands, it's in kind. So as a way of making sure that the work we're doing is industrially relevant, they're able to input to the research and the projects that we're running. So I'll talk a little bit more about why the Digital CMC Cersei was formed. I'll talk then about the framework that we're developing. So a lot of the regulatory tools, the regulatory guidance is about what you have to do. What we're trying to do is give some examples in a framework of how you might do that, and then try to gain a consensus of the approach, the language, and potentially some templates as well. I've got some case studies that we'll talk about, and then quickly at the end, I'll cover the sandbox approach and the training that we'll be offering and doing for people. So quality by design, hopefully everybody now will have heard of it, even if not necessarily everybody is implementing it, but at least the principles of it are pretty well known. So it still has a large amount of experimental work. There's a lot of data that's required, and it can be very empirical. So where we're trying to move to is, there's a lot of digital tools, there's AI, there's a whole load of predictive work as well in CMC, formulation design we've just talked about, digital twins in modeling, manufacturing control. So how do we actually implement that in a practical way? So really sort of moving from quality by design, which is very empirical, very experimental based, to quality by digital design. So the real value of this is that you can use the models that you've built then to really explore a larger design space. You still need to do the validation and the verification work, but the models allow you to do it. And we will be publishing some work on exemplification of the benefits of this in the next couple of months. And I think for me, the bit having been involved in this that was really exciting was that the model allows you to do multi-objective optimization within your design space. So now, as well as absolutely quality is number one, I have to ensure that, but I can now optimize it against sustainability, cost, and a number of other factors that may be, affecting your business or at the time. So having that ability to really optimize and hone in on where the best spot is for you to work is something that we found really exciting and very beneficial. So there's a whole bunch of regulatory background about why we're involved in the digital side of it. I think, as we said, there's a number of different frameworks. We already have guidance on mechanistic models. There's quite a lot in drug development. But actually now we're getting new guidance on AI and how do they fit together? There's quite often a sort of a bit of complexity around that. So try and help with that. Some of the AI models are pretty complex. We've seen a lot of that yesterday, so I probably won't talk about that. And yesterday we certainly talked about data. It's something we care about a lot. Making sure you get it right from the start is the critical bit. And it's, I think for us as well, working in a university, so we are developing models, whether they're empirical mechanistic models or AI ones, but actually we should be doing this from the start. We should be thinking, is my data good enough for regulatory work? We're developing AI models. We might be using data that we're going to train a model that might get used by a company in a regulatory submission. So we need to be certain that that data is good enough right from the start. So if we can help people think that through and make sure they've done it, the experimental design, all of that side early on, then that's going to be good for everybody. And then the other area we're particularly going to be doing some, a core, one of our three main pillars really is around the training at the end of it. So we've seen today, everything's changing. It's changing so fast. So how do we help support the regulators with that? So providing some targeted training that is exactly the same for regulators, for academia, for industry. So the language we're using, the wording, the expectation then is the same across everybody. And so we're sort of at the stage where we've got some prototypes, and then what we'll be doing is going out and talking to people to make sure that, our approach would certainly need changing, but that it meets with all of the regulators' expectations. So we did a very unscientific poll. So this is across 7 large pharma companies that we're working with, about the number of digital tools they use in CMC. So out of about 80 tools, only about 10% ever see a regulatory submission. I think maybe that number is slightly different if you look into the manufacturing environment. It might be slightly higher, but there's still a huge amount of digital tools there that people are using in development, but it never goes into a submission, mainly because of the concern about risk and potential delay to a filing. It's just going to get more questions from a regulator. I'm not going to put it in. Please just go and do some more experiments, and we'll do it that way because we know that works and it's safe. So it's really, how do we get away from that? How do we save ourselves time, effort, money, material? So really what we're trying to do, I've talked about the framework, and I'll come back to that in data a little bit later. We want to have a CERSI and do the training as well. All the while absolutely focused on quality, but how do we do it more efficiently? How do we build that business case for digital transformation? Because that's really what this is all about. If there's no benefit, then nobody's going to do it, right? So that's really where we're aiming. Okay, so number of key outputs that we're doing then. So the framework and the case studies I'll come back and talk to. We have an AI assistant. So this is really to help the researchers that we've got understand all the regulatory frameworks. So we have a RAG database, a large language model that we can use to interrogate a carefully curated set of regulatory documents. And one of the key things that we built in to establish trust in this is that if it's not in those documents, it tells you it's not in those documents. I do not know the answer to it from the information you've given me in the RAG database. So it means you need to go elsewhere. And certainly, in an academic environment, helping those researchers understand it know where the key pieces of information are across the different regulators has been really beneficial. And I'll talk to the other two in a minute. Okay, so case studies. So we've picked 4 case studies. We deliberately picked models that we knew. So you might look at a couple of these and go, why are you bothering here talking to me about this type of a model, particularly solubility prediction of an AI in an organic solvent in a regulatory conference? Why do I care? So it's not the actual model itself, it's the type of model it is. So we've deliberately gone for a mixture of empirical mechanistic models, some that's just a large data model, and then some where we've got hybrid AI and mechanistic models as well. So the first one is around tablet stability prediction. So tablets will physically change over time. It slows down the release rate. How do we actually do some accelerated stability prediction to be able to predict that? So, when we put a regulatory submission in, I don't have to wait 6 months to a year to get my readouts. I can do it on maybe 1 to 2 months of data, and then we update that as we go along. So that's a mixture of empirical models. So there's 3 different sets of equations in there. The next one around solubility prediction is a mechanistic model. In our case, we've used Cosmo-RS. There's a bunch of others you can use. And then on top of that, we have a machine learning model that adds an extra level of improvement to the prediction. So we get about a 10-fold improvement from adding the machine learning model on the top. So we have some risk assessment then. So this is really about large data models for polymorph screening. So this is about affecting how much experimental work we feel we need to do. So again, really low risk model, but it's about the demonstration of the process. And then the last one is a manufacturing case. So this is a continuous direct compression line of tableting, and it's about understanding how the blenders, the feeders and the blenders work together. So a large data model in there. So the framework that we're going to do is really about helping people develop models as well as get them ready for regulatory submission. So right from the start of my ideation or the conceptualization of what I want my model to do, how do I make sure that the data I collect, the experiments that I do, how I curate, tag that data is all ready so that when I come to the piece at the end, we're good to go. Luckily, I don't need to go through this part of the slide. That's been well covered already. But we've based a lot of our work on the FDA's recent guidance around risk-based credibility assessments, but also taking into account there is other regulation, right? So it's actually based on the ASME V&V 40 approach, which was done for medical devices. There's elements of that we think are actually relevant. The EMA, we had a presentation on that guidance yesterday. Their risk-based decision tree is included in the work we're doing. And then also the MHRA has done a reasonable amount of work on how sort of the 5 principles of AI regulation. So that's really the structure of what we're doing for the framework with 4 case studies exemplifying it. So thinking very specifically then again about AI, where we started was we've got some very different use cases. Do the principles of AI actually apply to the empirical, the mechanistic models as well? Our feeling is that they do. A lot of the things about fairness, bias, uncertainty are things that you just sit there and go, well, that's good science. We should do that anyway. So it's about how do we harmonize the approach and the consistency of language. So we've started to develop guidance. This one here is against the 5 principles, and really it's to help people start to think about what is it I need to be doing as I go through that development stage of a model life cycle, not necessarily a product life cycle, but a model life cycle here. So what we do is, if we're going to go a little bit further, and we will have an interactive one, is if there's one of those areas that I'm interested in, so in this case here about mechanisms to provide clear explanation, we'll be able to hover over that, and then what pops out is some additional information. It contains three areas. So what do I look at for the data? What do I care about the actual tool itself? So whether it's the algorithm, and then the training. So just to be clear, sorry, I need to add an extra bit. This is the training of people. So these are the people that are using it. It's not the training of the models itself. And then within that, so for example, state the credibility factors, what we will be doing is, as we're building this up as we go along, is examples where people have done credibility evaluations. So this is much more on the mathematical equations, which uncertainty tool do I use? Do I use root mean squared, x squared, chi squared, critical evaluations, things like that. So that will be really there to help people develop it and point them to the right place for the guidance. So we've talked about the credibility plan, and I've covered sort of where we've brought in additional questions. And I think that probably the only thing I'm going to comment on this side is the very last one here is, not all questions are going to be applicable to all models. But I think what we're trying to do with the framework is to provide a conscious decision that as I go through it, that's applicable across all different types of models, of which AI, machine learning will be one of them. So it's that conscious decision base. One thing I will say probably around the credibility assessment plan is that currently large language models have been out of scope of our work. We haven't got any examples of that. So this is just like the next level of detail down. And here what we've done is we've just flagged where we've added the extra questions in that are very specific to the AI principles, transparency and explainability. So an example now that I'm going to talk about is solubility prediction. So again, from a regulatory point of view, this is so far away, an assessor's never going to see it. But it is a hybrid model, so it's got both mechanistic and then machine learning cases. So this has been written almost like if you like, a model master file type application. This is a model that we will use to predict it. So we can use it. So in this case, we've picked the older version of the model because it's published and people can get to it. We do now have it where it will give solubility curves at different temperatures. So question of interest, context of use. So it's generally that piece about solubility prediction, where we've picked a couple of general points about molecular weight for the types of compounds that we're going to be using. And that's quite a lot of that as we've gone through the iteration of developing the model is actually based on the data that we have available, so that we're clear, this is not going to work for large molecules, vaccine type compounds, and then also log P compounds. The model risk assessment, I think we've talked about that reasonably well yesterday, so I won't cover that in any more detail. So that's that. And then really about describing the models. So we're trying to provide a structured format for doing this of how it works. So we've got a hybrid model, in this case, Cosmo RS, and then with a machine learning random forest model on it. And just putting out that simple schematic really helps with the transparency, the explainability of what the model is actually doing. So the next one then is description of the data set. So here what we're really caring about is bias on the data. Where does it actually fit? So the image that you can see, I can see that, yeah. So the blue dots here are from the drug data bank, and then the orange dots or yellowy dots are actually our samples that we've used to train the model. So what we can see is that our molecular weights are at the smaller end of the compounds. So if we're going to be predicting things, 800 molecular weight, you're going to be a little bit more skeptical about the predictions than if you're at, the fairly safe 250, 300 molecular weight. So understanding that bias of the data and some of the tools that you've got now to visualize it can really help with that. Okay, so the last bits then here about the model training. So what have I trained my model on? So what we've done in this case is we do have a data set. I think it was about 650 compounds. There was a random selection for the validation data set. So that's the data that's held back. And then the model evaluation was carried about, in our case, using extensive cross-validation of that material, and the QR code there, if people want to see the paper and exactly how we did that, it's covered in detail in there. So that sort of structure is what we're trying to do, and provide examples across of a range of models. So as I sort of start to finish then now, the digital CMC sandbox. So certainly in the UK, the EMA have started doing this as well, about starting sandbox programs to really look at novel technologies and projects, so to give you that opportunity to talk with the regulator early. So this is actually currently the sandbox that I'm going to talk about here almost does two things, and we're probably about to split it in half. So part of it is provide a structured format and reporting for a credibility assessment. So this is the first part here. We've got the question of interest, context of use, and then the risk pace. And then the next one then is really that stage 4, so the credibility assessment, or the bits that I've covered in the last couple of slides. So that will be covered there, and it covers it. But what we're doing now is, so that's essentially, if you like, a static part to the sandbox, the report, and I think we're gonna take it out of there. But what we're quite excited about is you can bring a model into the sandbox. You can upload, the data will sit slightly outside of the sandbox, but we'll use REST API to talk to the model. And then what we're able to do in here is we're able to take our validation data set, and not just see how easy it is to see. Oh, sorry. Thank you. That's good. So what you can see is here we've got a little slider. And so what you're able to do is we're able to cut our validation data set. And so we can cut it into different bins. And then that will actually, when you click rerun, it actually does the uncertainty analysis for you. So it will re-give you your roots, the R-squared or RMSE values, depending on what you want. And so as a way, it started out for people just to play with it and understand the model, so from a training point of view. But I think also what we're really excited about is the opportunity that this gives for us to be able, for industry to be able to put their models in a safe space that regulators can then come. They can play with that data set. So in our case, this is just the validation data set. There are other things that you can do that we're working on as well. But just to give the regulators that confidence that your model is good, it's credible for its context of use and question of interest. So actually being able to play with it in a safe environment is something that we're quite excited about, and we think will really help in the future. We're probably a year or two away from that. This is still, some elements of this are conceptual, but certainly the MHRA are keen to see things like this where they can understand more about the model, give them more confidence in it, and it'll be you're then much less likely to get a whole bunch of questions back from your submission. There's other bits there we've put. So linking back to that framework and the guidance across each of these pieces, there's an explanation of what it is. There's some references to it in the guidance. So if you're going to share that report internally, that also helps you share the learning and the knowledge across the organization. So lastly, and this is very much, as I said, a core piece of what we're trying to do is how we help the training. So I said this right at the start, the training that we're intending to give will be exactly the same. So whether it's academia, industry, regulators, it's the same. So very much a modular approach, everything from introduction to AI, machine learning. We've got some quite detailed material for the case studies, so that actually it's sort of split into two. So part is the, if you like, the science, the maths behind the actual model. So it explains the model, It provides training on that for people. And then there's the bit about the credibility assessment. So it actually talks you through the credibility assessment and gives you examples, sorry, not examples, but it takes you through the steps and the rationale and the thinking about how we've developed that training. And then there'll be a little bit on the sandbox as well when we get there. So we've got, I think, 2 of the case studies now done. The high-level general training's done, and we're still working on the sandbox. But our intent is that in the new year, in early 2026, we will be able to provide external training. So I have one last request. So as I said, we work with a number of mainly large pharma innovators at the moment. We are very aware that that probably means that our view is a bit blinkered. And we're really keen to interact with generics companies to make sure that what we're doing is going to add value to you as well. You know, we're not just here to serve large pharma. So it would be really helpful, please, if you could complete a survey here. So this is about how much people are using digital tools in CMC, and it will really help us focus our work to make sure that we can, you know, deliver the most impact to the whole pharmaceutical industry, as well as the regulators. Yep, so we've got a newsletter, and yeah, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Houson. That was an excellent overview of the maturity framework to show how AI is overlapping in the CMC domain. So next move to our next presentation from Dr. Katie Duncan from the GSK.
There we go. Hi, everyone. So today I'm going to talk about advancing pharmaceutical manufacturing through process models and digital twins. So I don't need to sell this audience on the importance of digital design and modeling, but just wanted to bring to the fore that even in NASA and SpaceX, manual experimentation is not how tech development works. And if it's not working in spacecraft, why should it work in, why do we rely on it in pharmaceutical manufacturing? So GSK has adopted the strategic approach of modeling by first intent. And this slide captures the complex ecosystem of process models working across development and manufacture at GSK. And this highlights the interconnected nature of these models, wherein challenges in any one place can lead to struggles everywhere. And as we heard about extensely yesterday, there are various guidance documents out there from regulatory bodies and standards organizations, including ICH, ASME, EMA, and FDA. And these guidance documents provide a rich foundation in which we ground our science at GSK. To delve into the EMA QIG position paper on process models in more detail, this guidance ties dossier content to risk, largely mirroring and clarifying the ICH points to consider on model impact. Further, this guidance provides further discussion around the validation piece, wherein the validation required should be commensurate with the overall risk of the model. Turning now to the FDA, the 2025 guidance document on considerations for the use of AI to support regulatory decision-making has been discussed a number of times during this workshop, so I won't belabor it. But overall, wanted to highlight that this guidance aligns well with the ASME principles and those in ICH Q9 on quality risk management. Also wanted to highlight this 2024 paper that further discusses the existing risk-based frameworks for model validation and lifecycle maintenance that could aid in the adoption of process models for pharmaceutical manufacturing. This paper uses case studies to illustrate the implications of applying a model risk framework to facilitate model validation and lifecycle maintenance in the manufacture of pharmaceuticals and biological products. With all of that regulatory and scientific background in hand, let's turn now to an actual example of the use of process models and AI at GSK. So digital twins are typically defined as an in silico and connected replica of an existing physical asset that can be either a product or a process. The digital twin consists of the physical asset, the virtual asset, and a bidirectional connectivity between them that enables continuous communication, data and information exchange, and the implementation of digital twin-induced actions. Pharmaceutical digital twins can have dual objectives: in silico process development during R&D and for the control and optimization of the processes in R&D and manufacturing. And it's important to note that the digital twin doesn't necessarily have to be tied to AI, but can also just represent the model in the background to analyze or control the model for output to feedback. At GSK, we conduct formulation and filling in a continuous process known as formufilling. Formufilling has a number of advantages, including increased control over the process, decreases in logistic pressure, and it facilitates an on-demand production. And this complicated diagram gives an example of what the formufilling line looks like. I'm not going to go into the specifics, but the key is that microfluidics play an important role in the formulation. And I also want to highlight the presence of this control valve that allows the stream to be diverted to waste if necessary. This diagram captures the many complex underlying models that are driving several processes at several points of the formufilling process. The key here is that you can barely see it at the bottom, but that full batch release testing is still being conducted. We are not currently performing real-time release, but envision doing so in the future. So in 2023, before many of the guidance documents that I discussed in the beginning of this presentation were released, GSK engaged with regulators at EMA for their feedback on this digital twin model, asking if the Quality Innovation Group agreed with our approach for model verification at commercial scale and that the performance can be demonstrated as part of PPQ. The QIG agreed that this model could be considered to be low or to moderate impact given the end product testing remains in place. This model remains medium impact even in a level 3 type situation, as long as the model performance is appropriately demonstrated by small scale and in silico experiments. Now, the feedback on the previous slide represents just one data point in our ongoing path to implementation, which includes various interactions with regulators. And I want to stress that this is a rapidly evolving area where terminology and expectations are changing frequently. So industry and regulators need to be engaged in open dialogue and collaboration, which is one reason I'm so thrilled to be at this conference today. So for the initial commercial supply, we only need limited data in the dossier, and model validation is not required. But as things develop and we obtain more data to make the model more robust and then potentially upgrade, we can then potentially upgrade to a higher risk model based on the updated justification, based on this increased data. And deploying the model at a lower risk allows us to continue to innovate while providing medicines to patients sooner without any additional risk to those patients. So here is our current proposal for dossier content and how we plan to lay out the information in our regulatory submissions. As we continue to monitor and improve our model over time, we will need to reconsider the model risk and the associated dossier content. And we will refer to model maintenance protocols to ensure the consistent performance of the model and to eventually enable upgrading the model risk. So in this example, that I just laid out, model development cannot be seen as separate from commercial development. And here, regulators play a huge role in ensuring the success of digitalization in manufacturing and the future of manufacturing facilities. We need early deployment for the evaluation and refinement of process models, as we all learn here. We are all also conscious of the questions about how inspectors will view process models and the apprehension from the quality side that often comes on how these will be perceived. And we want to make sure that deploying these models doesn't raise the bar from a GMP perspective. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Duncan, for sharing the digital twin work from the GSK side. And our next and final speaker for this session is from Dr. J. Paul Kirwan from Amgen.
Okay, thanks very much to the organizers for the chance to be here. So I just have a few opening comments. So I've got several slides. Beg your pardon, I'm going to go through them kind of quick to stay on time, but I wanted to make sure and share a lot of these ideas with all of you. So I kept them in there. And I want to also make sure in the beginning of the talk that I thank all my colleagues that I work very closely with. I want to name them out right now: Mike Abernathy, Rita Algori, Kabir Alawalia, Nina Koshan, Brett Griswold, and Sabrina Sandhu, and many others. Together, we form a team that is helping Amgen, that is to strive to be a world leader in digital regulatory transformation. Like Dr. Houson was talking about the CIRSE group, we really want to make a big impact there, and I hope that the information I show you today will help demonstrate we're able to do that. So today I'm going to talk more about the regulatory submission side of technology and digital transformation. So think of things like a theme like data management, data exchange, and regulatory pathways. That's kind of where we're at. So I think many of you know that years ago it used to be that we put submissions on paper and we delivered them by trucks to the health authorities, right? And then the reviewers had to go through all those big stacks of paper and everything, and it was a very cumbersome process. And when the early 2000s came and we moved to the eCTD, that made a big difference. Dramatically increased the review time and all those kinds of ideas. But there's still information trapped in static PDF documents, right? And I think that all of you understand this idea. That's why we're here today. But I wanted to make this point. And we're quickly moving towards an era where we can utilize structured data, like was discussed a little bit yesterday, and also generative AI to produce a one-click global dossier. And if that sounds dramatic, just stay tuned and we're going to talk about it a little bit more here. So if we just remember the sort of the challenges of our current situation, right? As you take a product through development from preclinical space all the way to post-approval, the regulatory burden on maintaining these products globally is really dramatic. It scales exponentially as you move from left to right in this image. And you end up with thousands of documents that have to be managed, different expectations in different regions. And it's, we should be proud of ourselves for being diligent and being successful in this, challenging framework, but we really need to get better. And honestly, biopharmaceutical regulatory affairs, this industry, we lag a lot of other industries in the implementation of digital technology, whether it's aerospace or other kinds of disciplines, financial, banking, these kinds of things. So think about how we need to push forward in that space to make this better. And so, oops, let's see, go back. Yeah, okay. So just further the drivers, okay, of digital transformation. Just to comment on a few, I'll be brief here, but information on regulatory filing is often narrative based, and that's challenging to deal with. It's unstructured, like was discussed yesterday. There's data management challenges that we need to deal with, consistency issues. It's difficult to standardize. I mentioned this already, there's divergent expectations in different regional health authorities. And over on the far right of the screen, there's no centralized process or platform in which to file our submissions as of right now, and it creates a big challenge. So what I want to show here is basically our end-to-end vision of digital regulatory transformation, the future state of regulatory exchange, right? And so if you start all the way on the left, from source data systems through digital authoring capabilities, exchanging that information through a cloud-based platform of some kind, and then on into health authority assessment. This is really what we envision for the future. And I think the most exciting aspect of this image is that all of these tools are possible today. Several of them are even operational. Okay, so keep that in mind as we move forward in this. And I really want to make that point. So here we've got just basically another representation of the same concept, but what I'll use in this slide is just a chance to sort of highlight all of the benefits that we gain from moving to this digital transformation approach for regulatory. So, for example, intense savings in time and efficiency and optimization, increased manufacturing capacity, and of course, increased global patient access. So I'll come back to these a little bit further in the talk, and we'll discuss them some more. Okay, so if we're going to share data and exchange data, okay, we have to have a standardized approach, right? And so, of course, like I mentioned, the ICH put out the ECDD, and that did organize how we're supposed to, in general, put information into our regulatory filing. But we really need more structure. We need more granularity than that. And so on the right side of the screen, I've got some examples of initiatives and efforts that are happening to standardize data. So like right from the top, PQCMC, FDA's effort to standardize data. And you're going to see this throughout my talk, this reference to FHIR. So we pronounce it FHIR. So this is the Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resource. This is the protocol that currently manages electronic healthcare records, and it allows that information to be exchanged in an encrypted format. So there's a security protection there. And so, FDA developed a standard according to that framework. You also have ICH SPQS, so Structured Product Quality Submissions. They're also establishing a guideline, and if you go down to the bottom, it calls upon the ISO IDMP list of standards that indicate how information data can be organized in a regulatory filing. And also there's labeling and clinical standards that are being established. So with all these, we can take advantage of some capabilities here. But what I want to focus on a little bit further is there's an industry working group that has worked very hard to produce what's called the Pharmaceutical Quality Industry FHIR standard. There's actually an implementation guide. If you go to the HL7 FHIR website and you Google this, you can find the implementation guide, which is the first of its kind for CMC. And it is more, let's say, thorough than FDA's PQCMC standard. It attempts to organize all the information in Module 3, for example. There's 14 CMC domains that have been identified, and you'll see on that website that there are some aspects that are out of scope as of right now in the standard, like devices and things like this, but that's yet to come. And I think this is makes a big progress for the industry, and we need to have the standardization. So if we go down the road of all this, FHIR capability is FHIR standard, what does that let us do? Well, this slide is supposed to show kind of an image or a model of what data exchange could look like. So what I'll say is it doesn't exist yet, but we have successfully demonstrated some proof of concept experiments to show that we can exchange data in JSON or XML format from one server to another server, and we can exchange simple stability data. So we've been able to do that through the PQI working group, and it shows this framework is possible, where you could have test labs, manufacturers, and then health authorities all sharing information in this way with security associated with the FHIR standard. And so how does this compare to our current situation? So I mean, if you look on the left there, so like I said before, we actually have more static information in the PDFs. It's difficult to keep this updated. It's time consuming to format it. There's limited scalability and very limited reuse, right? So every time there's a change in manufacturing, for example, a life cycle change, you have to go check all your different submissions, of course, figure out where that change impacts, what region does it impact, do the regulatory assessment, all those kind of things. We want to move past that to this state where we can say develop our templates or develop, establish a tool that allows for automation ready or structured content authoring, right? So that's the idea with this discussion of structured content, is that it allows for automation. And so in the middle there, it's an example of what our templates look like as we build in structured content, componentization, as we call it. And then in the end, on the right, that'd be an idea of what would be produced when we can generate this pipeline of data, as I showed in the fire slide just a moment ago. See here. Okay, so I'm gonna move past this slide because it more or less makes the same comments, but just keep in mind there's that narrative issue that we have not exactly addressed. So with structured content authoring, that's one aspect of digital authoring technologies, but I think this group knows very well that there's also the generative AI authoring aspect of things, right? And so the way Amgen sees it is these are kind of two pieces to the same puzzle. The sections that are more tabulated and more data heavy, we really envision those being well suited for structured content authoring. But in the narrative heavy sections, for example, and actually what we're finding even more sections than we thought before, they're very amenable to generative AI authoring, as shown on the right. And we do have enterprise based generative AI capabilities that we're using for this. So, for example, I'll use the quality overall summary, which I think many of you are aware of. It's a target that a lot of companies are working on. We've been able to feed our tool, previous submissions and previous examples of quality overall summaries, and then the way our tool works is the user can then go in and ask and give a new information from a freshly authored module 3, let's say, for example, and then generate the initial quality overall summary. And then the user can even modify that answer and say, well, I want to change it this way. There's like an interactive ability with it, right? And so what it does, it's not going to give us the final draft, but it's going to get to a draft that can be reviewed very efficiently, right? So in fact, it produces the initial draft in somewhere like 3 to 5 minutes. And to make the clear point, it used to take us somewhere around 100 hours of work to produce the quality overall summary, and that gets reduced, to just minutes. And so you can immediately go into the review stage. So it's not going to produce a final draft, but it is quite good. And the review stage can start from there. And that goes back to the comments from the earlier speakers about, keeping a human in the loop. We're always going to maintain a human in the loop in this process, but I think it's very effective. And so, like, if you're thinking about digital authoring considerations, these are some of the ideas we have on our minds right now. So, where is our data coming from? So I mentioned that before, the data model and pipeline. That's pretty important to whether you're using a knowledge graph-based data model to describe how your data is organized, or whether you use a relational database or some combination of those two things. I think that's pretty important. We're following the FAIR principles and Pharma 4.0 concepts. I'm sure most of you are somewhat familiar with those. And we need to ask questions about how our data will get assembled, and what's the impact on the process, like for data verification and things like that. So these are all ideas that we are thinking of pretty directly. So just to make a quick comparison here between structured content and generative AI authoring, I think the main thing with structured content, the reason we're not going to go to all or 100% generative AI is because you need to have some reuse capability, right? So otherwise, it sort of defeats one of the main ideas of automation. So there will be some percentage of for example, module 3 that will lend itself to, that needed for reuse and lend itself to SEA. But we're finding, like I said a moment ago, that more and more of the sections are very amenable for generative AI, and the strengths there that it can create and summarize. There's a little bit of element of uniqueness, like I think was discussed yesterday in the panel discussion, that even human beings are going to produce an output a little bit differently each time, and that's something that we want in a lot of ways. It's a nuance that we want to keep, and so I think that's a strength of Gen AI. And I think the most powerful one, if you zip down to the bottom of the right-hand side of the slide, the ability to integrate with SCA is really powerful in my opinion, because I think in my view, the generative AI tools become even more powerful if they're relying on clear ontologies, very structured data. That's a powerful combination I think is going to turn out to be really really valuable for our industry. Okay, so we've talked about all the authoring ideas. Now, what's the regulatory pathway that we should consider pursuing to file this information once we've built out all of our tools, right? And we suggest it's a pack reliance type pathway. And so those of you that aren't familiar, obviously the post-approval change reliance is a concept that has been promoted by the WHO. And basically it's typically for CMC changes that happen in the life cycle space, where say less mature health authorities can refer to other health authorities in their review. And so what that'd be referred to as traditional reliance, okay? So where there's a reference health authority, for example, like the EMA, and other health authorities would then refer to that assessment in a sequential manner after the final assessment is issued, okay? What we're pushing for and what we're actually doing actively right now is what we call a parallel or real-time reliance collaboration, okay? In this case, we're filing a single dossier with multiple health authorities, and we're asking them, review this on your own terms. There will be a reference health authority. You can refer to that health authority's final assessment, or you can make your own decisions and you can move forward with your review. Either one of those is acceptable. We're not putting any restrictions on how health authorities want to pursue their review, but all the tools are there to be used. And I'll talk about how we're doing that on the next slide, but the hint is at the bottom of this slide. So it's a combination of digital authoring, obviously on the industry side, and then the sharing of a cloud-based system to exchange that information, and then the pack reliance collaboration. And so I want to sort of just define a few of the initiatives that are in place to create this cloud-based environment, right? So on the FDA side, there's Project PRISM, where they're in collaboration with an organization called DNA Nexus. That system is not operational to my knowledge, but I know they are actively developing it. There's also some a clinical based protocol for sharing information in the cloud, but I don't know the status of that completely right now, but ICH M11. In addition, there's the ICH Product Quality Knowledge Management Task Force, the PQKM Task Force, and their objective is to develop an acceptable, from the European standpoint, an acceptable cloud-based platform to share information. And then finally, many of you may know that there's Cumulus Synergy, which has a for-profit arm spun off to Cumulus Technologies that has cloud-based tool to allow data exchange, really information exchange at this point. But I want to emphasize that Cumulus is the only operational platform that can do this, and that's why we're using it. So it's really not a issue of picking winners and losers or things like this that makes some officials uncomfortable. It's just that this is the tool that's operational and we're using it. Okay, I'm gonna go past this slide. Forgive me. Just kind of the same points about collaboration. Okay, so let's get to our pilot. So we engaged in a pilot for a CMC lifecycle change. Okay, for Vectibix. This was a high mass process drug substance change. And the scope of countries was 63 countries in the scope of this change. So what we set out to do was to collaborate with Cumulus and with any health authorities that would be willing to participate in this pilot. And what we got was an 84% country engagement. So what I mean by that is 53 of the 63 countries in scope agreed to participate in reliance, okay? And then out of those, 25 of those countries are using Cumulus. And so this continues to grow as we speak, because there are more countries that are health authorities that are making a decision whether or not to participate. And then they make a decision and say, oh, yeah, we're in. And they look at all the information that's in the Cumulus system. They say, this is great. And they issue approvals. In some cases, approvals were issued in like 2 months, right? So there's a dramatic impact here. And the results are shown on this slide. So forgive me for this slide being busy, but I'm going to make the main point of it. And that is that with this submission, we saw 70% of the approvals at 7 months time post-submission that we would typically see after 3 years for a life cycle submission, okay? And the reason we saw that is because, for one, we're submitting a single global dossier. Questions can be shared, through the platform, so health authorities were able to see the different questions that other health authorities were asked. I know in at least one case, an individual health authority said, "Oh, well, we see this question asked by one to Amgen. Amgen gave the response. We like that response. We're not going to ask a question. We're going to issue approval." So these are dramatic results, I really have to say, without exaggerating. And I think it's something that, as we think about all these different reliance tools that are available to us, we want to converge on on an approach that is the most efficient and that, industry can get behind. So that's the pitch I'm going to make for today. So again, just to return to the benefits of our digital transformation. Obviously, if you combine these three things together, digital authoring, the use of a cloud-based system like a Cumulus, for example, and PAC reliance, or just reliance in general, okay, then we see approximately a 75% efficiency gain in using this approach. And not to mention the increased manufacturing capacity, because you have to maintain less versions of products for different markets and wait as this change is approved versus this region. It's just way more efficient, right? And of course, the main driver for, I think, all of us, and definitely for Amgen, is the increased access for patients globally, because what we've seen is that health authorities that typically would have been in, say, wave two or even wave 3 of the submission, they're jumping forward and they have access to the dossier from the moment we submit, right? The moment we make it available in a Cumulus. So I think this is really a promising approach. Okay. It's not that there aren't challenges, right? So I want to make sure and be honest about that, and I'll just kind of go over this briefly. But I mean, obviously, there's cybersecurity and data privacy considerations that health authorities and others have real genuine concerns about. I think that those can be addressed. I think that probably an organization like a Cumulus is probably the best to address their own security in their platform. But we are confident, with using it. I mean, what's the status of your digital maturity in your organization, right? I think we have to I think it was mentioned yesterday that there are challenges with where our data lives and with different repositories. What form is it in, and how do we organize that data and get it into a filing? There's a lot to be discussed there that I think I'd like to cover in the panel discussion. There's diverging initiatives, right? So that's something I mentioned before. The fact there's so many reliance initiatives is a positive. It says everyone's recognizing we have a problem to solve, but it's also creating a burden for resources, because some health authorities are saying, yeah, we can't participate in your pilot. There's these other 3 or 4, and we're already trying to figure out those, or we're already engaged, and this is getting too busy. It's just a little too hectic. So everybody's moving very fast, and that's good, but we need to sort of converge on whatever pathway is going to give us the best results. That's what I would suggest. And obviously, there is an issue with legacy filings, that's for sure, because even if you advance your data status forward to a high level of digital maturity, let's say, then for a product that's a global company that has a product in the market for 20 years plus, you're going to have to think about how to deal with your legacy products that have been filed for a long time, and that's not an easy challenge to solve. So. But I think I just want to return back to the positive here. I mean, Amgen sees what is possible, right, in using these tools. And I think we can see dramatic acceleration in authoring on the front side. We can see real-time data exchange through a cloud-based system. And we replace that staggered submission wave model with a simultaneous global submission model. And I think that that's really, what we need to push for. It's not that there aren't some challenges to overcome, but I think this is where we want to go. And lastly, I think, everybody in this room knows, for a long time, global harmonization and innovation have worked together, right? But I think never more so than now, right? Because everything's moving so fast with artificial intelligence and so much excitement around this. These two things together, harmonization and innovation, especially with AI and technology, are really going to make a big difference for patients. And so I think with that, I want to just acknowledge my colleagues one more time and thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you to all of our speakers for their excellent presentations and thoughtful insights. I think each of you bring a valuable insight for today's discussion, and I hope the audience will have lot of questions and ideas during the panel discussion.